pill you took is part of a trace program. It's designed to disrupt your input output carrier signal so we can pinpoint your location. What does that mean?
It means buckle your seatbelt, Lord, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. It is Urban with you again tonight. We're going to be doing 2 nights with you while James is out of town. He'll be back Friday, so he asked me to fill in for you. So it's pretty close to where we left off last time. So we're going to do a bit of recap on that. We're going to also continue talking about that concept of breath, bioenergetics, how that relates to breath wars and whatnot. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. Let's see, I didn't give the date. I usually do. Just turned July 23rd, 2026 here on the East Coast. So let me go ahead and bring up my screen so everybody can see, and we'll go ahead and get into it. Awesome. Cool. So basically what we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to pick up where we left off. What we talked about last time was the idea of kind of energy flow and how that's related to breath. And primarily the relation is that breath is always moving within you for the duration of your life. It goes from the moment you're born until you die. That is the precise amount of weight that can be measured. The difference when you die, that's actually the breath that leaves. So that tells you that it's inside you, for the entire time you're alive. And we know that because we breathe in and out our entire life. And so this is really one of the very earliest concepts ever known. So the three paths that have converged, that should be noted, is that this was a series of material that we did cover last couple times. I guest hosted the episode that James and I did, the interview between James and I when he was out of town. Then he came back. We decided to do the part 2 together on Molten MSAART, the plasma technology, Plasmoid, the Taurus engines. Malcolm Bendall was the guy who created the thunderstorm generator. But I should probably preface that in a moment when we get into the vocabulary. MSAART stands for Molten MSAART, Atomic Reconstruction Technology. And we covered that over 2 episodes. Leuren Moret, I've been posting the content that I found of hers on the Internet Archive. And her content, she talks about how nuclear energy is effectively the same thing. There's no difference between what Nikola Tesla was looking into, free energy, 0-point energy as it's called. We're going to take a look into that because that's an interesting thing I wanted to start with. But it's all the same thing. So we're going to talk about how those converge. So the 3 directions that we're going to look at, TEM, Trans Dielectric-Electromagnetism. Let's see, how or where do I subscribe, Gabriella? You can just probably go to my profile if you're on the Substack app. I know you're watching on Substack, so if you go to the wherever my name or my profile is, it should let you subscribe. How's it going, Boots? Nice to see you. How's it going? Josh, Warrior Family, glad to be here with you. Let's all hit the like button. Yes, I would very much appreciate for everybody to hit the like button. Boots is always here to make sure that we remind you to hit the like button because it really helps us out. It really helps James out for his channel. And then whatever platform you're watching this on. I know I'm on a few tonight. I usually go on a few different platforms, but if there is a like button, if there's a subscribe button, unfortunately, I know that sometimes the worst part about it is that sometimes, like me personally, I use like the PC versions of the app or desktop computer, whatever. And then the apps, if you do them like you're on a smartphone or something and you're trying to use it that way, it has a completely different format. So sometimes it's trips you up that way. So yeah, before we get started, let me give you an interesting visual. This is also from the text by Ken Wheeler because his visuals are just amazing. So let's bring this up here. One moment. Got a whole album of this stuff saved just because there's so many different useful diagrams. Here it is. I found it. Okay, let me bring it up for you guys to see real quick. So this is a very simple hub and spoke model. It's literally what it's based off of. So the actual wheel itself, like the green outline here on the image, that's the magneto-dielectric archetype. So then the spokes are the radial alternating, so it can either go in towards the center or out towards the green outer edge of the wheel. And that's when we use the words centrifugal and centripetal, that's what we mean. The inertial plane, right here, also the green outline here where it's pointing to. Counterspatial is the center, that's 0 point. The axle is 0 point. So here it was a very interesting thing that I came across, and this was interesting because this was what my gut intuition originally went towards, but I didn't really have anything to substantiate or not substantiate it until I came across this. So also this was a Ken Wheeler's book, Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism. It's a fascinating text, and it really pieces things together so very well. It's been very interesting. So I'll read it. It translates the word, I think that's Zaus, I think it's how you'd say it, is generally translated as cavity. And then the RG Veda, particularly the hole in the nave of a wheel through which the axle runs. These are translations of those words. And A.N. Singh has shown conclusively that in Indian mathematical usage, current during the earlier centuries of the Christian era, Ka means 0. And one thing that's very important to note is that 0 is a relatively new, around the time of the Renaissance. It's a relatively new invention. So what we're looking at here is what do they think of before that? And so they would use these words here, Ka for 0. And then, let's see, Suri Deva, I think that's somebody's name, commenting on somebody else, Aryadaba, says that the Kas refer to voids. Thus, Kadivanke means it's 18 places denoted by 0. So that's just basically 18 decimal points, if you will. Among other words denoting 0 are Sunya, Akasa, Vyoma, Antariska, Naba, Anta, and Purna. We are immediately struck by the fact that the words Sunya, void, and Purna, plenum, should have a common reference, the implication being that all numbers are virtually or potentially present, and that which is without number, expressing this as an equation, that anything minus itself, x minus x, anything minus itself is basically what that means. Or another way to look at it, I guess, is that numbers can be brought into anything just by multiplying it. So it's like you have one thing, but then if you just have another one of that thing, then there's numbers. But the idea is potential, infinite potential. So it is apparent that 0 is to number as possibility is to actuality. Again, employment of the term ananta with the same reference implies an identification of 0 with infinity. That was what my gut had kind of went towards, is that perhaps 0, being a newer invention, may have been misconstrued to be nothing, because we're supposedly told that nothing came out of something came out of nothing, rather. So perhaps in the realm of potentials, it could have, in that respect, potential energy. And that's really kind of what he talked when he uses the word inertia. That's kind of where my mind goes. Okay, let's see. Let's go back over here. And we'll go ahead and get into some of these. So we're going to basically look at some select terms. First, some new terms from Ken Wheeler's framework. Then we're going to compare that to what Malcolm Bendall is pretty much identical. And then some of the stuff from Tectonic Warfare from the Plasmoid engines. So let's make this a little smaller. So yeah, this features keywords and terms from Ken Wheeler's Transverse Dielectro-Electromagnetism, which is a bit of a mouthful, I'm aware. So that's an acronym TEM. We're going to also compare MSAART, Molten CR, atomic reconstruction technology, and Leuren Moret's interviews on tectonic warfare, because they have a lot of crossover. How's it going, Argo? So nice to see you tonight. We're picking up kind of where we left off. We're going to do a little bit of recap. We're going to talk about some things that line up between different sources, you know, different people coming to very much the same conclusion. At least that's kind of what I hope to demonstrate. So first, some links and stuff. When I share this post and stuff, I'll put a copy of all this so that you guys can access all this. And some of it's already in the description, I think. So transverse dielectro-electromagnetism, TEM. The true suppressed architecture of light and radiation. It's a 3-part coaxial ether circuit that utterly obliterates the light of self-propagating photons. It's a type of invisible drill or engine, I guess you could look at it that way, because this is what kind of propels things forward. It's like you can't have kinetic energy without potential energy. So light is actually a type of mechanical engine, not a particle. By hijacking the transverse dielectromagnetism geometry, controllers use its central dielectric spike to physically penetrate human tissue. This is how they're able to get past the tissue layer with certain frequencies, is that they can do it if they have the understanding of how to break down and re-engineer certain wavelengths. That's what they can do. So that's how they get past tissue with weaponized frequencies. Next, we have the z-axis, which, as I kind of mentioned last time, I might serve to put the graphic back up. One moment. Let me give you a visual. So, if you look here on the bottom, I'm going to zoom in. The dark green kind of center axis, you know, a lot of the modern theory today would argue that it's time that the wave is moving through. But in reality, where Ken Wheeler comes into the picture and kind of revolutionizes it and kind of corrects it in a way, is by saying that the z-axis is actually ether. It's dielectric inertial potential. And so that's what makes his theory unique. That's what this dielectromagnetism is. And that's what this term z-axis is. Here, let me hide that. The z-axis, it's the radial dielectric core. And I know that's a little small, but it says, if you think of the water drop like the background of the image, the single spherical drop of water in this analogy exists in counter space. So the whole idea of wave-particle duality, if you think of it like a wave interference, it's that little dot right there of water. That's the idea of how it collapses supposedly down into matter. But in reality, that's the same way that we think of solids, liquids, and gases, the stages of matter, is really what he's trying to say with you have dielectric, vacuum, ether, and then what happens is that in voidance, when that goes away, it goes away in the form of magnetism. But then the magnetism basically spews out the front and tries to turn back in on itself, trying to get back into the ether. And so that's why we have the idea of polarization. And that's where you get the idea of the hyperboloid. And one thing that I did manage to put together was a visual for that, because visuals are always helpful. So let's see, I think you guys will like this. So this is kind of what a hyperboloid looks like. And we can kind of mess with the settings, but I'll go ahead and read through it a bit. So the dielectric inertial plane, which is the blue radial disk. In this model, what is conventionally called the Bloch wall is actually the dielectric inertial plane, so it's that z-axis. It is the counter spatial. So counter space is like vacuum, void, ether. It is the counter spatial radial centripetal boundary. It is the prime mover and the source of the magnetic field's inertia to magnetic divergence, the red and orange particle flow. So the red and orange particle flow, that's magnetic divergence. Magnetism is not actually a force that attracts, but rather the spatial vectorization of dielectric discharge. Again, magnetism is spatial vectorization of dielectric discharge. When dielectric inertia is lost, it creates space called polarization as a radiating centrifugal double hyperbola, which is like a dumbbell shape. 3, field incommensurability. Dielectricity, or the counterspatial dielectricity, and magnetism, which is spatial, are mutually repellent conjugate pairs because they're tied together in a binding system, the magnet. They are forced to mediate their pressures at 90 degrees to each other, creating this specific geometry. A good example of field incommensurability. When you have a magnet, if you were to cut the magnet into a bunch of different pieces, all of those pieces would be magnetic in their own right. And so that means that the quality of magnetism has to exist independently, or it's incommensurate with the object. And it exists kind of behind the scenes somewhere. 4, gyromagnetic precession in the vortex. The twisting of the fields creates a hypotrochoid, which is like a spirograph, like the little toys. The dielectric plane forces the magnetic axis to precess or to wobble. This creates either a clockwise or a counterclockwise double vortex. So the spinning left and spinning right, that seeks equilibrium, driving the flow of the field. So if you see, I can kind of adjust and it's like a top. So it'll wobble more based on how much it's tilted. 5, the golden ratio, which has to do with, if you think of like a sunflower, the way that the little seeds in the middle, I think it's phyllotaxis, supposedly, when you kind of sketch this out like Ken Wheeler did in this diagram here, he found out, let's see if I've got it. I might have the other one. Yeah, here it is. So basically, this is related to the golden ratio phi. And so magnetic pressure gradients naturally follow the golden ratio of 137.5077 degrees. forming a pattern identical to sunflower growth. The vortex particles in the simulation are now distributed exactly along that angle, revealing the geometric perfection of the field. Finally, plasmoid and EVO toroidal core, the 0 point at the center, the high pressure field converges and forms a plasmoid, or an exotic vacuum occurrence, EVO. This is a coherent, self-sustaining toroidal structure of plasma and magnetic fields exhibiting a 16-sector geometric resonance. That's what Malcolm Bendall talks about. So now that we have that out of the way, we'll just kind of twist things around. So if we mess with the magnetic divergence, it increases the spatial extension, which is the z-axis throw. I've actually got, if you look down here in the bottom left corner, you can see how that graph looks. So magnetic divergence doesn't do a good job of picking that setting up, but that's actually related to the throw. We can't actually see it because it's in counter space. Okay, so that's magnetic divergence. Again, the z-axis throw of the magnetic hyperboloid as dielectric inertia discharges. The twist rate, you can see those are vector arrows, how the vortex twists, the precession angle, the gyromagnetic wobble of the magnetic axis caused by torque from the dielectric inertial plane. If we use the slider that says dielectric tension, this is the radius, the capacitance or the strength of the counter spatial inertial plane. It forces the magnetic field to widen space. And then this is just a speed switch. But then if we go ahead and we look at it from the top down and we crank the speed up, you can kind of see some cool little effects happen. Make it really big. That's called the Ferris-Cell view, but yeah, that is a visual so that people have a mental image. I think that's kind of important to this. So maybe that will help. So that's the z-axis, has to do with potential and inertia. And what it does is it pulls and sucks things in, and it has a tendency to try and void space, to kind of bring space inwards. And in doing that, when it does that, it kind of shoots out what we call magnetism, what we know as magnetism. And then in that process, that creates electricity and everything else. So field incommensurability. See, Zero on YouTube says, interesting. I have a lossless magneto-dielectric coupling equation. Perfect conservation of energy between the magnetic field scale and the electric field scale. It's probably precisely what this is. I mean, it's exactly what we're probably about to talk about in like the next slide. I've got something that sounds very familiar to that on here. Just because you said that, let me go ahead and show you these. So these are the drawings of Ken Wheeler, and they were included in his text, Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism. And it really just ties things together so well. And so I definitely suggest checking out his work. Let's see. Yeah, here's another view of what we were just looking at, the simulation. That's just kind of a different 2D view, I guess you could say. But what I wanted to show you, let's see. Yeah, see, here was the sunflower thing. counter space has to do with vertices. Let's see. Still trying to find it. I think, yes, here it is. So right here, what you're looking at is how starting at 1, basically from electrification is where magnetism goes into dielectricity. And then that, basically in that blue line, you get from that electricity. That's electrification. 2, magnetic polarization. That actually is where you're going from electricity to dielectricity. And then in the process, the blue is field, red is accumulation. So he's showing you kind of how these play off of each other. And then here, you have positive time and no time. You have positive space and you have counter space. And real quick, one more before we get back over here. This here on the right is another good visual. So I think really what you were talking about, lossless magnetodielectric coupling equation, is fundamentally this. Now, I really surprisingly only studied magnetism and stuff like that when I took physics. It was very light on that. They didn't teach us a lot about that. It was more just like the traditional stuff. So when I picked this back up, I kind of had to fill in all of the stuff that I was lacking. But unironically, when you learn it from the way that he proposes it, it makes more sense, I feel like. A lot of things fit into place nice and neat. And then not to mention the fact that you have the thunderstorm Bendall turbine, which he gets more into the number stuff. He does more of the math, Malcolm Bendall, and he's got a lot of writing. But I think all this technology is actually the one and the same thing. I don't think there's any difference between Tesla's technology and what they're using for geoengineering and what they claim to be nuclear technology. There's absolutely no difference. So field incommensurability, it's the inescapable asymmetrical friction between space and counter space that governs all atomic operations in the creation of physical matter. The quantum hacking key. The elite use this exact mathematical friction to map the pressure gradients holding the human atomic structure together. It provides the foundational physics required to dissolve or manipulate biological matter at its most fundamental quantum level. A ferrocell, that was it, kind of similar to what we were just looking at. Second. It's called a ferrohydrodynamic lens. Very similar to a these are very close to a meta lens. They're not the same thing, but they're very much engineered using similar processes. It's an advanced optical magnetic viewing device utilizing nanotechnology to empirically expose the true 3D spatial geometry of the ether and magnetic fields. Unveiling the invisible cage proves that the academic establishment has deliberately blinded humanity to the true shape of magnetic fields. The controllers use these lenses to accurately map, view, and manipulate the invisible electromagnetic prisons they build around human subjects. Pretty much, yeah, as far as I understand, they do. There's a term. There's magnetic divergence, what we're about to get into right now. Magneto-dielectric hyperboloid, the literal multispatial shape of a magnet, yes, acting as a permanent polarized ether portal that constantly bleeds energy into 3D space. Localized reality warping. The magnet is a localized portal engine. By weaponizing this exact double hyperbola shape, the elite can generate inescapable localized gravitational or spatial anomalies to trap or irradiate targeted human biology within the 15-minute containment zones. Yeah, now they're even talking about how people are talking about how they can use plasma to do teleportation and stuff, and it's possible. And if they are doing it, it would all be made very arguably possible if they were under, they had the ability to manipulate, or they knew how to make use of, that's a better way to put it, to make use of the ether, to know, to, how do you pull potential energy out of that? How do you do it optimally? Dielectric reflectors, meta-optics, and meta-lenses are something that's very close to this. It's a superluminal transmission medium used to translate one type of ether movement into another by violently torquing the atomic inertial plane. It's a type of suppressed power source because it's the exact technological mechanism for extracting infinite power from the void. The elite use this power to power and fund the black budget networks while deliberately keeping the human herd dependent on explosive, primitive, metered energy systems. It is a good thing to remember to distinguish between implosive and explosive. Implosive technology is what they're able to use to create 0-point energy. It implodes, it doesn't explode. This was the term that I was trying to think of just a moment ago, hypotrochoid vectorization. It's a spirograph-like geometric pattern brutally produced by the divergent and convergent pressure of magnetism as it creates physical 3D space. The architecture of the kill box. Space itself is an engineered pattern. The system maps its exact geometry to construct invisible spiraling electromagnetic kill boxes that perfectly enclose and squeeze the human target from all angles without their conscious realization. This is an interesting bit. I liked this when I saw it. It was something that I appreciated because I've always found bismuth crystals to be fascinating, and he gives a very coherent and rational breakdown of that. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, right here. Okay, so interestingly enough, when we talk about counter space, here's a book here that was illustrated by Leonardo da Vinci. There's supposedly only 2 copies of this, but he shows here on the left a solid, and then you have a counter spatial solid, or vacuous. You see that means vacuum or void, negative space. So in Ken Wheeler's book, he talks about how bismuth, when it crystallizes in multiple casts, you get the same result, a high dielectric inertia imprints, the golden ratio marks on the cast. This is common to growth in all living matter and predicted to exist in dielectric inertia, now confirmed. So why does bismuth make this very fascinating, almost, jagged square pattern? So this is counterspatial crystallization. In iron, on the left here, where you could see the cube, what they're able to do is they're able to pull, using that same mechanism, they're able to pull the cube into 3D space. And I don't know if I have where he was talking about the other one here, but he talks about basically you can pull iron out, but in the same way that iron has this phenomena where you can extend it into a cube that way. You can get bismuth to crystallize, but it actually crystallizes inwardly because of counter spatial inertia. So that's where you get the idea of the 4D tesseroid or tesseract. It's basically exactly that. And that's why bismuth have these really fascinating designs. How's it going, Philip? Nice to see you tonight. Glad to see everybody. We're talking about bismuth, and essentially bismuth is one of the #1 examples where you can see something crystallize in counter space. So it's actually kind of forming the crystal inwardly, and because let me think of how to word this right. Because bismuth has certain properties, it has a high inertial resistivity. It doesn't want to move, and so because of that, it kind of crystallizes inwardly, and in those jagged lines, it resists inertia, I think is how he phrases it. Dielectric inertia forms these centripetal Hopper crystal formations. I think I had it written down somewhere else, but I'm not sure. It might be in the presentation somewhere. He calls it a counter space hypercube, I think. So yeah, that's why I had the background like that as the crystallization of bismuth. So counter space, ether, 0 point, the void, a non-dimensional, unmanifested membrane of the ether, the absolute 0 point fulcrum of the universe that is the exact opposite of space, time, and movement. It's the control room of reality, because space is merely the temporary exhaust of the system. So counter space is the actual invisible dimension where the elite direct energy and intention before it bleeds into the 3D physical trap that we inhabit. Because the real fascinating question is if silence is where our thoughts occur. Again, if our thoughts actually occur in the location of silence and the realm of information, you know, the fact that y'all can watch me give a presentation and I'm in one place and you guys are in some other place. We're doing it over the air. So there's this realm of information, and it's kind of eternal because I can go back and watch a video that I made 2 years ago, and it's kind of interesting. So I really do have an inkling, can't prove it, but I have an inkling that there's actually really no difference between those. I think they may all exist kind of in the same place, if that makes sense. The realm of potential. And when you get into all of like the Kabbalism, they even talk about that. They talk about they use the word archetype and potential and stuff like that. So I think what they were talking about in all of these old mystical traditions, they were trying to encode this stuff. Bismuth, inertial, dielectric, anti-cube. It's a representational of counter space and inertia in general. Dielectricity. Magnetism is actually dielectrical voidance. The dielectricity is the centripetal, meaning it pulls inward, counterspatial, and radial prime mover of the cosmos. Voidance is the violent erasure. Voidance is the violent erasure of space, wrongly called magnetic attraction, as objects accelerate to return to dielectric inertia. The lie of attraction, gravity, and magnetic attraction are hallucinations. You're held to the earth and manipulated by what's called voidance, a ruthless mathematical drive of the ether to erase the physical space that your matter occupies. So that's what it means by voidance. So when it kind of turns, the magnet is not bipolar, it doesn't have two poles. What happens is that it kind of shoots out and then sucks itself back in, which I've got this diagram here, probably a better visual. Shoot, 1 second. Yeah, here it is. So right here. So if you look, you can see on the left in the red, you have a magnetic field in a magnet, and then on the right, you have a dielectric field in a magnet. So magnetic field, radiation, dielectric field, polarization creates space and discharge. It says all matter and mass is massive solely due to magnetism, naturally and logically so. Then a dielectric field in a magnet on the right in the yellow. This is charge inertial counter space. It destroys space. It's centripetal. And then if we go up here, you can see magnetic vectorization on the bottom goes outwards. Work, movement, action, force. Dielectric voidance on the top. Rest. You have decreasing movement. Decreasing, I guess you could say, all increasing acceleration equals decreasing movement, contrary to conventional logic. That's what is meant by counter space. Increasing inertia. Increasing inertia is decreasing work, decreasing movement. However, this is where it gets interesting. Increasing acceleration in voidance. So what does he mean? Increasing acceleration, trying to get rid of itself. What they call, what do they call that now? The accelerationism. Basically, we need to speed up and get rid of more people is what they're trying to do now. But that's what is meant by increasing acceleration in voidance. So if acceleration is trying to void itself, to cancel itself out, it's doing that faster. So, but these play off of each other. It literally, the two play, magnetism and dielectric voidance. These play off of each other almost in the same way as a male and a female, play off of each other to create a child, because that's what creates everything. It really is an engine. So the accretion disk. This is a flattened toroidal donut-shaped concentration of dielectric inertia at the exact spatial center of any magnetic or galactic system. So I don't know if that image works well. Let me see if I can get a better one. Here, I found it. So, let's see. Accretion disk is like the disk-looking thing in the middle. The inertial plane, the zero-point membrane of absolute rest and lowest pressure at the center of an electrified object, where all spatial magnetic radiation rebounds and terminates. It's the universal fulcrum. Modern science hides this by calling it a block wall. In reality, is the physical membrane of the physical membrane that the controllers pierce and torque to extract free electricity, utilizing the vacuum of counter space to bypass the laws of thermodynamics. Torque and torsion, the violent breaking or twisting force applied to the superluminal dielectric plane to forcibly generate electricity or manipulate physical reality. The bleeding of the ether. Electricity is not a natural flow, it is the bleeding wound of the ether. The controllers extract power by literally twisting the invisible counterspatial fabric of the universe until it fractures into usable enslaving energy. Breath theft. Because of what this is, you understand that the key to it is that it is a key to everything. Because if you solve this and you figure out how to do it on this level, you can do it on all the other levels. Take a drink. Polarization. It's the creation of space, not into space. Again, you're not creating matter into space. It's the creation of space as a resultant byproduct of the divergence of magnetism. The creation of the illusion of space, the false perception of north and south or positive and negative, masking the singular and expanding spatial vectorization of dielectric discharge. It's a matrix of duality. Direct current to alternating current is what Malcolm Bendall in his theory calls it. The foundational lie of the physical world, the elite project duality, kayfabe, positive, negative, the actual dialectic, not dielectric, dialectic, Hegel's dialectic. It's the same formula too, into physics textbooks to prevent the human herd from recognizing that reality is processed by a singular, unified, etheric machine. Space itself is just a polarized cage. Magnetic divergence. The spatial centrifugal radiation and expansion of the ether, resulting entirely from the loss of dielectric inertia, the mechanical process that literally creates the three-dimensional illusion of space. It's the fabrication of spatial prisons. Space isn't actually a void. It is the physical footprint of magnetic radiation, because space itself is generated by diverging magnetic fields. Controllers utilizing advanced ether technology can artificially generate, stretch, warp, or collapse physical dimensions, trapping targets in localized spatial containment zones that victims falsely perceive as structured reality. So this is a segment point into, we're going to go into some terms that I think we already covered some of these. The part 1 and 2 that James and I did is kind of referencing Malcolm Bendall's stuff now. And this kind of from a whole different, he's written his own stuff. He's done his own research independent of Ken Wheeler. So I'm kind of trying to figure out how much of, are they talking about the same thing? Are they seeing the same thing? So we're going to recap, not all of the words, but just a couple of them that I thought. So MSAART, Molten Sea Arc Atomic Reconstruction Technology. It's a zero-point implosive engine that reverse engineers the biblical Ark of the Covenant and Solomon's molten sea to dismantle toxic matter down to pure DC energy and reconstruct it without resistance. It's an alchemical machine. The leader building physical engines that execute the mathematical syntax of the gods by mimicking ancient geometry. They are transitioning from fossil fuel combustion to the direct mechanical harvesting of the quantum vacuum. Plasmoid EVO. An EVO is an exotic vacuum occurrence. A self-sustaining, they call them sentient atomic batteries, toroidal clusters of pure protons or electrons, violently dragged out of the ether via symmetrical vacuum pressure implosions. It's captured star fire, the extraction of raw, unbridled, universal life force into a physical container The system creates microscopic, self-regulated entities that absorb and release millions of times more power than chemical batteries, essentially bottling the ether. Taurus Vara, I think that's how you say it. I think it's a Vara. Elon Musk has got one of these sitting on his bedstand, and then when it popped up in this research, it was pretty surprising, but that's interesting that he had it sitting there on some photo that he posted. An engine devoid of straight lines that fires positive and negative forces into a singularity, generating implosive centripetal negative entropy to bypass classical thermodynamics. The anti-gravity drive, the abandonment of death-inducing explosive centrifugal technology. The Vara utilizes sacred geometry to pull matter into a frictionless vacuum, allowing for matter-to-energy propulsion and the nullification of osmotic charge attraction, gravity. It should be noted also that all of the stuff that the Nazis were working on and the bell, I would make a bet that it was the same technology too. So there's no difference in it. I think it's just the same technology. And I think that's why the paperclip project had to happen. That's why they wanted them so much, that they would give them immunity for what they did. Singularity 0 point. 0 point pops up everywhere. Point G, the absolute dead center of the torus, where the illusion of time, space, and physical matter completely disintegrates. The dimensional conversion occurs. It's a universal backdoor because, like I said, once you crack this, you can use this to generate anything. That's the generative principle. And it makes very good sense that this is point G. That's what they say to the Freemasons at a certain degree, is that it is G for the generative principle. By focusing energy into this zero-dimensional point. So let's say by zero-dimensional point, the best analogy that you could use is potentially zero itself, because if you know, let's see, everybody, I don't know about everybody these days, but it used to be common knowledge that you can't divide by zero. Why is that? Perhaps that's where I don't think something like that had to have happened you can't invent something and then it be invented by humans and you just can't divide by it. So that means you've broken something or something's not right. And everybody inherently feels that. And perhaps that stems from the fact that zero is not nothing. It's actually potential. But when you graph out the function 1 over x, you get this weird behavior in the middle. Almost like if you were to, rotate the thing a little bit, it would be the hyperboloid, or 1/2 of it at least. But the closer you get, like you can't get to zero, but you can do 0.0001, and you're just going to get a very big number. So that's what is meant by 0 point. You could also think of a wheel. It's the actual hub, the axle. I think I still got that. Yeah, here it is. Let you guys take a look at that for a minute while I take a drink. So, they say don't reinvent the wheel. And so when I say that it's a back door, it's because once the wheel became, made itself all around the world, it enabled us to do things that we've never done before. And now we still use wheels to this day. And so let's just say that kind of stands for something. Everybody still uses the same thing to this day that they did pretty much all of human history. So that's kind of metaphorical, I guess you could say. you'd expect it from something where you could draw an analogy between how matter is created. Coulomb balls, Yukawa balls, they're self-assembling crystalline nested shell structures that naturally form in dusty complex plasmas, exhibiting features thought to be exclusive to biological life. Yeah, we're actually about to get into that right now. We're going to get into a little bit of that tonight. Yeah, so basically, these are very close to plasmoids. There might be some differences, but it's another term for generally a ball of plasma. Proves that the plasma universe is literally alive and conscious. The elite know that empty space is not dead. It is a thinking, evolving crystalline mind capable of memory transmission and replication. More on that, I would tell people to check out the idea of morphic resonance by Rupert Sheldrake. It's very fascinating. Morphic resonance, what governs how things evolve over time. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of the tectonic warfare stuff, and we might cover some of it either tonight or tomorrow, but I do want to cover specifically that. We're going to cover some stuff from Leuren Moret, who worked briefly at Lawrence Livermore, only for like a year. She didn't work there long, but the reason she talks about in her interview, she says, well, it's like the mafia. Once you get in, you can't really get out. So tectonic warfare, back to energy fields, weaponized. Basically, it's what Tesla was working on. Tesla has a lot of interesting little things that I've dug up, but they talk about this death ray. Oh, did Tesla cause this big explosion that was stronger than nuclear weapons? The Tuskunga explosion in Siberia, Russia in 1908. Did Nikola Tesla do this with his space laser or whatever? Well, I don't know. But what I do know is that the government sent people to blow his tower up with TNT because he was supposedly, quote unquote, talking to the Germans or something. And so there's this big explosion in Siberia, Russia. That was an explosion because we know that there were like trees were burned, but it was supposedly bigger than nuclear explosion. So then we go into a text by Bruce Cathy, and that book is titled The Energy Grid, and that was somewhere in this presentation. I've got stuff for tonight and stuff for tomorrow, but we're going to get into some of it in either one of those. But let me bring this up real quick. Here we go. So this is from a whole other source, unrelated, but it came into the whole Tesla connection, talking about for nuclear explosions to occur, devices have to be put at exact coordinates, harmonic coordinates of the Earth. This is substantiated by Leuren Moret. She talks about this. She says that there's no such thing as different nuclear devices. All of them had to have been built exactly the same. They don't work correctly if they're not configured exactly to where they're going to be detonated. And sure enough, they were tested at the 33rd degree parallel in New Mexico. And then you had the detonations at 34 and 32 in Japan. But then here, from Bruce Cathy's book, the 1908 Tunguska explosion wasn't a meteor. It executed sharp, controlled turns before detonating, proving it's not a guided entity, either an extraterrestrial ship crashing or a massive survey peg blasted into the grid to recalibrate the system. Furthermore, covert military operations are using shape charges fired into subterranean magma pools by bouncing shock waves at precise 120-degree angles along global ley lines. They can trigger engineered mega earthquakes and tsunamis. And it's like, it wouldn't be too crazy if that's like not just like what's going on right now. It's like, this is literally what's going on right now. But you go and you look into Nikola Tesla, and it's like, did Tesla make this happen with it? This was a rumor, apparently, at the time. This was a rumor that they tried to pin this on Tesla. And I'm wondering, maybe there's some other post that I saw, and it was like, if the explosion went off in St. Petersburg, it would have been catastrophic. But it supposedly executed sharp, controlled turns. And it detonated in Siberia, where there's nobody, pretty much, I guess. But then you have the government sending, I guess, army or marshals over to Long Island to blow up Tesla's tower with dynamite because he's collaborating with the Germans. So maybe something knocked it off course. I don't know. But then we know that John Trump got access to all of that research. So it really does kind of anchor itself into the modern era. But tectonic warfare. This is, again, Leuren Moret's stuff, but I'm tying this into everything else I've found. And that's kind of what we've been talking about tonight, is I want to make clear that this isn't just necessarily one thing I found. I found a lot of stuff that lines up very well when you start to factor in plasma, 0-point energy, and the like. All kinds of comes together very well. So it's basically Tesla's free energy technology weaponized against us. Tectonic warfare is the ultimate manifestation of covert environmental weaponization, fundamentally designed to induce planetary catastrophes that the ignorant masses will falsely attribute to Mother Nature. The concept was pioneered by Dr. Gordon MacDonald, a Jason scientist for the Pentagon and a member of President Lyndon Johnson's Science Advisory Committee, who detailed the protocol in his 1968 chapter, How to Wreck the Environment. Can't make this stuff up. And here's a quote. It says, operations producing such conditions might be carried out covertly, since nature's great irregularity permits storms, floods, droughts, earthquakes, and tidal waves to be viewed as unusual but not unexpected. Such a secret war need never be declared or ever known by the affected populations. And I think this is what Bill Cooper eventually talked about, silent weapons for quiet wars. Using systems like HARP to target fault lines, the elite can trigger earthquakes to orchestrate land grabs and energy wars while remaining completely unaccountable. Take a drink. I don't know if Brown's gas is the same thing as a plasmoid or if it has anything to do with it, but it really rang very similar. The concepts sound very much like the same thing, and I'd be surprised if they weren't making use of it. But Leuren Moret talks about Brown's gas, which is a highly efficient form of matter from dissociating water, which is what Malcolm Bendall uses in his thunderstorm generator. Has to do with basically collapsing a water bubble in on itself, imploding it. And it can transmute radioactive waste and perform impossible welding techniques. Suppress panacea, the elite hide a ubiquitous elemental fuel capable of neutralizing the radioactive omnicide. They force the world to choke on nuclear fallout. She calls it Wigner dust. Maybe a form of smart dust. I don't know. Wigner dust, nuclear fallout, fossil fuels solely to preserve the artificial scarcity that powers the financial matrix. So basically, the technology has been around for a very long time, and they just once there's too many people, they can't let too many people find out about it, because if too many people find out about it, they're going to take the technology back. So they just have to have a big explosion every couple hundred years or something. And I think it really is starting to seem much more likely that there was a more recent disaster. Don't know what, don't know where. We know there was one in 1908 in Siberia, Russia, that was knocked off course and was stronger than nuclear bombs. So we also talked about the ringmakers of Saturn. That's another facet to this. A catenoid or a pseudosphere. The hidden geometric structures of gravity. A catenoid is a curve of a suspended string. A pseudosphere is a geometric object where gravity pushes rather than pulls. Reversalist physics proves gravity is not merely an attractive force, but rather a manipulable waveform that can be inverted to push matter. The elite possess the geometric blueprints for anti-gravity propulsion while forcing the herd to rely on explosive primitive combustion. DOR, deadly orgone radiation, the weaponization of primordial life force energy, occurring when natural orgone is contaminated with radioactive material. It's a biological suffocation field. The elite intentionally pollute the planet's baseline life force, orgone, with radioactive isotopes, blanketing populations in a suffocating field of bioenergetic sickness that induces mass psychological and physical decay. This is pretty interesting. An eidetic or eidolic vision, the ancient suppressed capability of the human eye to act as a projector of consciousness, interacting with the idea messages, or eidola, radiating from all matter. Symbolism, you could think of it as symbolism. An idea message is like you see something without even talking, and like, what is the idea that pops in your head? The blinded God, the materialist science matrix violently suppresses the reality that human consciousness can physically leak through the eyes to interact with and alter matter, blinding humanity to its inherent reality-bending creative power. And in his framework, Ken Wheeler's, he denotes the dielectric element. He calls it psi, the Greek letter psi. He says that electricity is magnetism multiplied by dielectric, or phi times psi is electricity. They call it psi, like psychic energy, psi. I think it's one and the same thing. 0 point energy pops up again. The infinite fluctuating energy present in the vacuum of space, which continues to boil and persist even at temperatures of absolute zero. It's the proof of artificial scarcity. The universe is boiling with free and inexhaustible power. Malcolm Bendall even showed that you could get rid of the trash and turn it into fuel. So there's no question that this technology exists. The elite enforce a planetary death cult of fossil fuels, poverty, and radioactive poison simply to maintain absolute economic control over the herd. It's called human husbandry. Elopic energy, a combination of electrical and optical energy patterns used in radionics to bypass conventional physical barriers. It's an invisible scalpel, energy that can be dilated in to manipulate human biology from afar, offering the capability for miraculous remote healing or untraceable silent assassination from any distance. And to answer the question, that's done through ELF and VLF, extremely low frequencies, very low frequencies. Let me see who it was. Here, the lossless magneto-dielectric coupling. It just popped in my mind, and I was thinking about this, so this might be what you're looking for. It's a homopolar generator, a highly efficient structure where only one electromagnetic pole is present, equally distributing all charge. band engine, the foundational geometry required for infinite frictionless energy extraction. The elites suppressed homopolar technology to force humanity to rely on inefficient bipolar alternating currents that necessitate endless fuel consumption. So, I think there's one more word. Vril, what they've called vril, breath, chi, prana. I think all of it, psi. That's what Ken Wheeler calls it, psi. I think it's all has to do with silence is where your thoughts occur, or the realm of potential is actually not a figure of speech, it's literal. Vril is the fundamental resonant energy inherent to planetary structure, visually perceived by initiates as a radiant black light. The dark sun, the ancient limitless planetary power source coveted by secret societies of the Third Reich, hidden from the profane masses to prevent them from ascending beyond their biological tethering. Z-rays, the dielectric pulse, a theoretical non-electromagnetic waveform capable of being channeled into a deeply destructive, untraceable force. Annihilator, Ultimate Annihilator, the apocalyptic endgame of directed energy weaponry, utilizing undiscovered physics to bypass all known shielding and obliterate targets without a single trace of conventional electromagnetic signature. Yeah, so those were Malcolm Bendall, Leuren Moret, and Ken Wheeler stuff. So let's see. Let me see. 1 second. Get back to where I was at. Okay, here we go. So last time that we did a show that I was here to guest host, we talked about bioenergetics, biophotonics, and how that factored into breath. And so I kind of wanted to cap all that off. Biophotonics. Ken Wheeler doesn't like the idea of a photon. He calls it the fourfold quadrature of light and matter, or transverse dielectro-electromagnetism. The medical establishment is systematically lobotomized using a variety of means, your understanding of your own anatomy, reducing respiration, the word for breathing, respiration, but to conspire, to inspire. It all comes back to breath. So to reduce respiration to a sterile mechanical exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide gases. It's a deliberate obscuration, ruthlessly extracted from all of the sources that we've covered over the plasmoid engines, the dielectromagnetism, all of that coming together. Breath and James's sources, obviously. I'll give a little plug to those while I'm here. Let's go ahead and do that. Breath words. So if you already go to the links in the post description, if you're on any of the YouTube or Rumble or anything like that, all of the links down there are already there for James's Breath Wars series. But he's authored 5 books to date. He's done audio books on Rumble, which is where the link is in the description. He's done audiobooks for 4 of those so far on Rumble. You can watch those, and the books are free to download off of his site. They're only available in the digital format, but they're going to be free. I don't think he's going to charge anybody for them. So that's kind of where we got into this idea of breath. I was looking for a connection between breath and how does it factor into biophotonics, how does it factor into plasma, and also the idea of psi or psychic energy. But as Ked Wheeler fills in the blanks, psychic energies, dielectric energy, or that 0 point, the idea that N0 is a type of infinite potential, or silence is where your thoughts occur, the same idea. But we talked a little bit about that last time. That's where breath comes in to this. So it's the human biocomputer is a breath engine. Breath is the primary mechanical intake valve for hyperdimensional energetics. The act of breathing is directly responsible for generating the biopsychic plasma of the aura and fueling the coherent biophotonic light field that mathematically structures consciousness. So it's a breath is obviously a type of pump. There's a dual role to it, in and out, before the body can generate light or plasma. Coincidentally, there is in our blood, they call it plasma. And they have places you can go and sell your plasma. So just coincidentally, I guess they decided to use the same word if there's no connection. But I will just kind of be a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. Whenever there's words that kind of appear like that, it's like, why did they have a reason they called it the same thing? Usually I feel like they are just trying to convince you that it's something different, because I don't think it is. I think the reason that they specifically have places where you can go to sell plasma is evident that they need it. They want it, just like they want your breath, or as it's been called in the mainstream, they call it loosh. Because if it's loosh, you don't need to know anything more about it. You can just call it some abstract thing. You don't need to know about anything else. You're never going to find anything about breath. You're never going to find anything about that if you call it loosh. I don't even know where that came from, but it seems like everybody knows that. And they've done a good job at making sure nobody really makes the breath connection. So James was very unique in that. I think it was it helped me understand this stuff a lot more, and that's kind of how we got to the subject. The ancients did not use words like breath as mere poetry. Inigo Swan's extraction of esoteric science reveals that the Sanskrit term prana is derived directly from the root meaning to breathe, or to blow and to live. It is rigorously defined as the psychoelectrical veil or psychoelectrical field manifesting in the individual as vitality. The Chinese discipline of qi equates to the exact same energetic intake. Life energy, vital energy, the breath of life, force, power, air, etc. Furthermore, since antiquity, the very concept of being animate specifically referred to a universally existing something that was likened to breath. Breathing is not just fueling of a chemical fire. It's the deliberate rhythmic inhalation of a psychic electrical charge that animates the lesser vehicle, the physical body, via the greater vehicle, the energetic blueprint, God, the source, whatever. Breath forging the fluidic plasma, called transduction. So once the psychoelectrical breath is pulled into the organism, it does not dissipate. It actually condenses into a tangible fluidic substance. One of the citations, Swan, a person, an author, lays bare the true nature of the human aura, obliterating the mystical cloud nonsense by defining it via its actual physical states, electrical atmospheres of fluidic plasma. Bioplasma, also historically tracked as animal magnetism, odic force, or psychic force, is a highly modal affluent substance generated by the human organization, the human body, that is, the human biocomputer. This right here, fundamentally, is the best way I can articulate what the human biocomputer is. It has to do with your breath, the binary play in the breath. Like you don't just have a breath in, you have an in and an out. And that actually really literally, when you look into it, you breathe in oxygen and then you breathe back out CO2. And that's actually what kind of makes the whole thing sustain itself. And that's the same idea as what Ken Wheeler's talking about in his model. His model is saying that dielectricity and magnetism are fundamentally doing the same thing. Boiling it down a lot and kind of trying to express that in a very simple way. But basically, that's kind of what he's talking about. Animal magnetism is fascinating. It's a very, it kind of dates back to the time of mesmerism and Franz Mesmer. German band Scorpions album and song, Animal Magnetism. Yeah, animal magnetism is a very old term for this. The idea that there can be action at a distance between specifically people. We talked in a couple episodes ago about haunted media, and we talked about the time period of the telegraph. And I think that's where this all dates from. The idea that people can communicate at that distance. The direct mechanical link between the breath and this plasma is undeniable. Carl von Reichenbach's exhaustive experiments proved that the odic flame, the visible emanation of this plasmic vital force, is a material manifestation so tangible that it could be affected by breath or a current of air. I read it again. It says that the odic flame, the visible emanation of this plasmic vital force, is a material manifestation so tangible that it could be affected by breath or a current of air. Which is interesting because it's an interesting play that we'll mention both breath and air here, because remember, information is going to play the counterfeit of breath. And that's going to be the air element for the Aquarian age, is information. The physical rhythm of the lungs. I've got a graphic here. It's a really good graphic. One second. Look one more place real quick. Yeah, here it is. This is one of the best graphics. I have to show it to you. I've already showed it to you, but I'll show it to you again. Here's a visual of that, breathing in and out. So the two vortexes that spin opposite directions, counterclockwise and clockwise, that's the same idea as breathing in and out. Okay, let's see. The direct, sorry, lost my spot. The physical rhythm of the lungs literally manipulates and shapes the fluidic plasma surrounding the body. Even neurology inadvertently admits this connection, noting that oscillations in the olfactory bulb, which is right behind your nose, that's the only one of your senses that doesn't go through the spine, is your sense of smell. It's called olfaction. Through the olfactory bulbs in the brain, are in phase with the rhythmic movement of the lungs. Even neurology admits that connection between vital force and plasma, noting that oscillations in the olfactory bulb in the brain are in phase with the rhythmic movement of the lungs. Biophotons, this is a term that pops up. I think a biophoton is the somewhere in between breath and vital energy and psi and plasma. I think it's all mixed in. Kind of hard to differentiate them, though. Like, you can't really, it's hard to come up with words that give you more specificity than that, other than inertia. So, how does this fluidic plasma translate into the structural organizations of life? Through the merciless physics of biophotonics. Mei Wan Ho exposes that the organism is an energetic vortex, constantly breathing in oxygen and exporting carbon dioxide and entropy, operating as a closed energetic domain powered by the green fuse of life. When the breath pulls in the psychoelectrical plasma, it charges the cellular matrix. Nobel laureate Albert St. Goyai provides the raw mechanics, quoting, "Life has learned to catch the electron in the excited state and let it drop back to the ground state through its biological machinery, utilizing its excess energy for life processes. This excess energy is radiated out as biophotons." And it's the, when you have people who are like moths to a light, and it's like they know that they want energy vampires, you would call them. It's that type of light, literally. It's, The Shining. It's probably what he meant in that movie, The Shining. Some people, they see that on you, and they got to come get it. They got to come vampire, suck it away. Fritz Popp's research proves that these biophotons are not emitted randomly. When stimulated, the light emission from a living organism decays according to a specific hyperbolic function. In quantum optics, this mathematical signature is the absolute diagnostic condition, proving the existence of a coherent light field. The entire organism is functioning as one coherent photon field bound to living matter. So breath pulls the plasma in. Plasma charges the electron. Electron emits the coherent photon. This is why esoteric systems relentlessly target the respiratory system by manipulating the breath, such as using specific mantras to invert the respiratory process and make the centrifugal force centripetal. The ancient engineers learned to force the semen and vital fluids inwards and upwards. By hacking the breath, they forcefully compressed the fluidic plasma, supercharging the biophotonic light field and mutating the human organism into a hyperdimensional superconductor for conscious evolution. So, energetic parasitism and the breath theft economy. So, because the mechanics of energetic parasitism, because the biopsychic energy has tangible substance, and we talked about in the haunted media episode how it has a flow to it. It kind of flows as a fluidic plasma. Because of this, it could be harvested, manipulated, and stolen. The sources ruthlessly expose the existence of entities and individuals operating as energetic parasites. Ingo Swan notes that within the aura of certain human beings, one can perceive convictions as clouds or densities of a dark, non-luminous color. He exposes their true nature brutally. He says, quote, "These clouds or densities can usually be seen as sucking in energy, perhaps like a black hole or a vacuum cleaner, or a vampire kind of way. No outpouring can be seen or only very weak ones. There are living human vampires, draining the vital breath and animating energetics of those around them to compensate for their own stagnant, deadened auras. Disembodied vampires and the sapping of the lifeblood. The horror extends far beyond living humans with parasitic auras. The occult realities laid bare by Thomas H. Burgoyne in The Light of Egypt reveal a class of entities known as disembodied human elementaries. These are the animal souls of depraved mortals who have sunk beneath the human plane and thus caused the separation of their divine souls from their conscious individuality. Cut off the divine source and unable to generate their own breath of life, they face total annihilation in the astral light. To survive, they become literal magnetic vampires who prolong their vicious existence by sapping the life blood of their mediumistic victims. They require a living human organism, one that is rich in the vital force but lacking in spiritual willpower. When they find a suitable, highly sensitive body, they bring the whole of their powerful magnetic will to bear upon the almost willless brain of their victims and slowly but surely eject their rightful occupant. They hijack the physical organism, feasting upon the victim's biomagnetic breath and vital fluids to sustain their own severed demonic existence. Which lines up with everything that James found. Exploitation. Energy vampirism thrives on the ignorance of the victim. Because modern society conditions humans to disbelieve in their own body, energy, and mind matrix, individuals wander through life leaking their psychoelectrical vitality, never realizing that they're bleeding out into the unseen world. Every suppressed emotion, every shallow breath, every act of unrestricted sensual lust drains the high vibrational vital fluids that protect the organism, leaving the individual defenseless against these magnetic vampires. That's what James really talks about in the Breath War series, and he calls it the Breath War economy. And fundamentally, he's talking about the same process. Now, he did his research on his own time, and then, you know, we're comparing it in this case. But basically, you've got a lot of other texts that are talking about some type, the common factors are this: some type of energy, life force energy. Usually when you get into mysticism and how do you manipulate that energy, it has to do with breathing exercises, breath, the breath of life, and the fact that fundamentally, I heard this earlier today, but it kind of applies now. You're getting paid hourly for something. What are you selling? Your labor? No, you're actually selling. Basically, you're being on call. You have to be available, and that's what you're selling. And so the real currencies are time and attention, because you spend time and you pay attention, and silence and thoughts and all that. If you pay attention to me, basically you're giving me access to put stuff on your stage, like a stage, or like it's just, I think the best thing to use is a stage. It's like you've got this platform and you're going to let me put on like a store window. Like you're going to let me fill up your store window, and that's what it is if you're paying attention to me. So if you're giving me your attention, you're giving me the ability to put stuff there in your head so that you can see it. And so those are the real currencies to this: time and attention. And that's actually, we're going to get into this tomorrow night. That's going to be what we're going to do tomorrow night. ancient indicators of plasma technology, because we've got a couple texts that really talk about, you know, the crystal sun, the fact that the ancients understood that the sun was a type of lens, which lines up with what Malcolm Bendall talks about. The sun basically acts as a way to convert the vacuum, the ether, the void into matter. So tomorrow we're going to talk about ancient indicators of plasma technology. There should be, I don't know if I put the link, I might have not put the link to last night's episode, but there should be a link to all of my Substack and stuff, and then James's channel. If you haven't liked the video, please do it, especially if you're watching on Cause Before Symptom, just because if I'm filling in for James and I'm on his channel, make sure to give the video a like so that that reflects good on me. I would appreciate it. And then if you're watching on my channels, please feel free to leave a like, but I would prefer that if you're on James's channel, you absolutely leave a like. And if you would like to leave a like on my channel, you can too, but you don't have to. If you're on James's, do it. And we're going to return back tomorrow with you guys, and we're going to finish this out. James will be back on Friday, so I'll just be with you for 2 nights, tonight and tomorrow night. And yeah, that wraps it up for tonight, guys. I hope you guys found this interesting. I will update everything, the links and stuff in the description. And tomorrow I will make sure that I get everything in there. The last couple episodes and the playlists and stuff. That way you guys can see the words and terms. I like to make sure that everybody can access those. And then when I post tonight's episode on Substack, I will take these slides and I'll put the file so that people can access this as like a PDF document, and all the links and stuff work too. So yeah, guys, I hope everybody has a good night, and I'm going to wrap it up here because my voice is starting to get hoarse and we kind of reached a good stopping point. So guys, thank you for tuning in. I will see y'all in the next one. Have a good night, guys.